It's great to see some friendly faces today that I haven't seen in a while. And I'm not going to be talking about what I usually talk about. Unfortunately, Toby has heard this last week. But thank you. So I have a confession to make. About a year and a half ago, I was really questioning my career path, wondering if I had made the right decision, if I needed to do something different. Because I was a reformed PR person. I evolved into community management, and all of a sudden, there was just the sea of sameness everywhere. Everywhere I looked, everyone was claiming to be a community manager, a social media manager, and could do everything that I was doing. So I was wondering, how do I break out of this? Do I need to try something different? Felt a bit in a rut. How many of you have felt in a rut before in your career where you just don't really know how to break out, you're looking for that inspiration, you're wondering if you need to try something new? Well, I read a book that kind of changed my thinking and really changed the process and the way that I do business, and really helped me think about a different way to tackle some of the challenges that I face in a regulated industry. See, regulated industry to me feels like home. I spent 8 years at the DoD, so anything compared to the DoD seems like a cakewalk. I moved over to the tech sector for a couple of years, trying to have some fun with the startup, and then made the leap into the healthcare industry, also very, very highly regulated. So I read this book called The Life and Death of Great American Cities by Jane Jacobs. Anybody familiar with Jane Jacobs? She's the godmother of urban planning. And I found that a lot of the principles that she wrote back in the 70s were very applicable to how we are building our online communities today. And I felt really in a rut from a career perspective because I saw the same mistakes being made in social that were being made in city planning. So let's take a look at this. If you were to map out all of the different digital assets, online assets, social assets that your company has, do you think it would be pretty messy? Do they all connect with each other? Do they all speak to one another? Are they all managed the same? Do they have the same process, governance? Probably not. Some companies, ours, has about 300 different microsites. Microsites alone. Not talking about all the different digital hooks and social properties and the platforms that support these entities. Social is one sliver. And when you think of social as part of an online community or an online city, it's more like a park, a collective area. And so to have our policy and process and governance that we're building in a regulated industry, or any industry for that matter, we had to start thinking about social as part of a broader community, a broader city, looking at it like a city. Jane Jacobs wrote in The Life and Death of Great American Cities, she said that logic cannot be imposed on a city, cannot be imposed because people make it. We cannot impose the logic on the buildings. We must conform around the people. We are doing, it is on, I'm sorry.
Isn't there a second mic on the sound reinforcement? There's
Okay.
one mic for the camera and then there's another one for the sound reinforcement. So Scobo was winning too. Lift your voice up.
Okay, I will be louder. I can do that without hurting anybody's ears. So basically, as she said, that you can't impose logic on people. The way that we've been building our social communities and our social platforms, our online communities, we have been imposing that logic on the platforms. We haven't thought about the people. Great, I have another one.
This is the one they'll hear you with.
Okay. I'm going to juggle. All right, so basically, we have this imposed logic. We need to think about the people as we're building the process, as we're building the training for our internal employees, our biggest advocates. And so as we thought about taking some of these urban planning principles and putting them into practice with our online planning, it helped us put our policy, our process, and training into better perspective and to give it a little bit more teeth. Because social was just part of the problem, part of the challenge, part of the city. And by showing internally these different types of connections that could be made if we were better planning our city, our online community, with neighborhoods, zones, structures, making it more walkable. So for instance, you have a microsite, you have a different social community, Twitter, Facebook, a microsite, your regular .com landing page. None of those are talking with each other. How do we create an experience, a walkable path for a person to get from one site to another and to know exactly what they should do when they get on that site or when they become part of that community? How are we packaging those experiences? How do we make our online communities, where social is just a sliver, more walkable? How can we create a heart of action? How do we create clarity, a better path? How do we become more engaging, more responsive? There's no coincidence that how many people take public transportation, T's, et cetera? What's the average wait time?
8 minutes.
Or faster in rush hour.
Basically, in surveys that have been taken, public transportation operates at its best and with better customer satisfaction every 10 minutes. If you have to wait longer than 10 minutes, you start to get very, very irritated. Same thing with social response, community engagement. 10 minutes is an expected response time, a public acknowledgement if you complain or you raise an issue on Twitter. The same methodology that it takes to build a city, we should be applying to building our online communities. We need to make the experience pleasurable. Now, governance and pleasure don't exactly go hand in hand. Governance is considered a pretty dirty word. Let's be honest here. When you talk about governance, it gets a bit icky. And you think policy and process and training seems very static and very removed. So how do we bring people into the equation? I'll give you a quick 5-step lens of what we've started doing to build some of this urban planning methodology into our process. The first thing we did was we looked at the Gartner Transit Map. Has everyone seen that? You should definitely look it up. So Gartner listed, using a nice tube roadmap system, they listed every single platform and external touch point that a company may have. And that map is pretty messy. And when you look at the map, they've organized everything by business function. So everything's really siloed. So Gartner was taking this transit map just to show exactly what exists in the company and how you can start linking via this tube map. But they were still reinforcing those silos that we need to break up. And so we wanted to kind of build our own map to understand everything that was existing at Aetna. All the microsites, all the platforms, all the social entities, all the exclusive member communities. Because we wanted to show everyone the mess there was. The number of sites that customers could go to, or members could go to, the overlap. What could be streamlined? How could we start talking with each other? How could our policy and process work together? How could the data behind the scenes work together so we could give you a better member experience? The only way we could do that was to map it. So we used the Gartner map and we said, okay, let's fill out everything that we know today. Let's see all the gaps and opportunities. So then after we did that, we knew that we didn't want to keep the map as is because that was the siloed structure. So we built our own map. We started to build and take our external touch points with our internal platforms and build neighborhood structures. So we were taking like sites, those platforms that support it, so that our data and everything behind the scenes was working better, so that you as a member could have a more seamless experience if you were going to these sites. Because based on data, we know if you went to this site, you would probably go to this other site or this other area of information. Or you would want to go to this social media site or this community because you wanted to have that communal experience. You wanted to talk about your issues. Social media wasn't the focus. It's a collective green area. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. So first we did the Gartner Map. That was lens one. Second lens was to build neighborhood structure, to build our own map. Then the third lens was to build crosswalks, to build connections between the different neighborhoods. Because while you had like sites, that didn't mean that you were going to contain that member in that one area at all times. Your healthcare experience, and this can apply to any company, you're going to be at a different stage of the life cycle or your customer journey, your member journey, your healthcare journey. And so we needed to make it possible for you to know exactly how to navigate between the different neighborhoods. Make it easy for you to walk between them, to get there, to understand where you were going. So we built those connections. And to bridge the old with the new, that's when we started to factor in the social media and the online community elements. Those were the collective green spaces. And we didn't want to get overzealous with the greening of our online community because there doesn't need to be a social network for everything. We just needed to simply bridge the old with the new and recognize that these were just collective communal spaces. And we needed to prepare for all questions and understand and know when to redirect and when to navigate our members in those spaces. The final phase was starting to build packaged experiences so that we could, in the communal space, as community managers, as frontline employees, as our biggest advocates, our employees, could then tell our members exactly how to get from point A to point B to point Z. We wanted to make it very easy, and we're still in that process. But by mapping it out and looking at this from an urban planning perspective, building these online communities, making it easy for a member to participate, to have that seamless interaction between the platforms and the external touch points, we were then able to give teeth to our policy, process, and governance. It started working together. Before this process, the policy, process, and governance training didn't really mean much because social was just a sliver. It wasn't understood how these collective green areas can bridge the old with the new, how we can be the navigator. So we had to understand and reevaluate, making people the center of what we do and why we create the policy that we do. Real quick about the policy and process and training. A city changes all the time. People change all the time. Human behavior changes all the time. So your policy process, your overall governance has to change with it, has to have that same methodology. We review all of our policy and process every quarter. We are constantly documenting what people are doing in the space, why they are doing it, what questions they are coming in with. And from behind the scenes, our employees, what questions do they have? What problems are they having? How are they bridging the different communities? How are they bridging the old with the new? We're documenting all of these 2 weeks before the end of the quarter. We ask for all of the feedback. We put all the feedback into all of the policy and process documents, and we feed it back into the organization. So it is constantly changing. All of our policy and process, all of our playbooks, all of our workflows are public for the organization to see. And one thing that has been really crucial through this development process is that we be transparent with the member. We created a community pact, which is a legalese-free, jargon-free version of what we expect in the space that we are communicating and what you should expect of us. We've taken our internal values, which don't really mean a thing unless you, the member, can hold us accountable too and know exactly what we stand for, to humanize us as a company. So we put that community pact out there so you could see how the values could be interpreted at every step in the process. So these are all building blocks, things that we are trying to do and use from a strategic approach to improve our governance, to make it more personable, and to help people understand what we do as a company, why we exist, that we're not big, bad, insurance company, that we are made of humans just like you, and that we conform around you, the member, that we're taking the feedback and we're pushing it back into the community. We're developing a community around you. We know that logic does not exist here. It exists with your feedback. It exists with what you put into the system. It only works if we're actively listening to you. And that policy and process has to conform. Those workflows, the playbooks, they're not static. They are ever changing.